The Dominion of Eternal Order had perfected the art of galactic conquest down to a precise science, which is impressive when you consider that most of their victims never actually realized they were being conquered until it was far too late. For 8,000 years, the Vexi had been the galaxy's premier psychological warfare specialists, capable of reducing entire civilizations to compliant servitude with nothing more than a concentrated psychic broadcast. Think of them as cosmic therapists, except instead of helping you work through your issues, they simply rewrote your personality to eliminate any inconvenient desires for freedom or self-determination. Their method was elegantly simple. Arrive at a planet, scan the dominant species' neural patterns, craft a personalized mental domination frequency, and broadcast it planet-wide. Within hours, entire worlds would voluntarily surrender, their populations suddenly convinced that serving the Dominion was not only logical, but deeply fulfilling on a spiritual level. The Vexhai called this process universal harmony, though their victims tended to call it nothing at all since independent thought had become somewhat optional. Admiral Zixthara had overseen 847 successful planetary acquisitions using this technique, which made the approaching blue-green world just another routine Tuesday. The species called themselves humans, and preliminary scans suggested they possessed the standard neural architecture found in most carbon-based lifeforms. Their technology was laughably primitive, their military forces scattered and uncoordinated, and their political systems were so fractured that conquest should have been trivial even without psychic intervention. The Admiral activated the domination broadcast with the casual confidence of someone who had never encountered failure. The psychic waves swept across Earth's surface, carrying carefully crafted mental commands designed to override human free will and replace it with dutiful submission to Dominion authority. Nothing happened. Well, that wasn't entirely accurate. Something did happen, but it wasn't what the Admiral had expected. Instead of the usual flood of surrender transmissions, Earth's communication networks lit up with what could only be described as laughter. Not the bitter laughter of despair or the hysterical laughter of broken minds, but genuine amusement, as if the entire planet had just heard an exceptionally good joke. Captain Elena Vasquez appeared on the main view screen of the Dominion flagship, her expression carrying the sort of professional courtesy typically reserved for door-to-door salespeople. Admiral Zixthara, I presume? This is Captain Vasquez speaking for Earth's Unified Defense Command. We received your psychic surrender demand, and I have to say, that was quite an impressive light show. Did it usually work better than that? The Admiral's four eyes blinked in sequence, a Vex-high expression of profound confusion. Your species should be experiencing complete neural compliance. Resistance is impossible once the harmony frequency has been established. About that, Elena said, consulting what appeared to be a standard tablet computer. Our neuroscientists have been studying your previous conquest for about 30 years now. Fascinating stuff, really. The way you exploit specific neural pathways to override conscious thought? Brilliant work. There's just one tiny problem with your approach. She paused, and the Admiral found himself leaning forward despite his growing sense that this conversation was not proceeding according to established protocols. You see, human brains evolved under some rather unique circumstances. We spent roughly 2 million years developing cognitive defenses against everything from predators to competing tribal groups to our own tendency towards self-destructive behavior. Our neural architecture isn't just resistant to external mental influence, it's actively hostile to it. Your psychic broadcasts don't make us compliant, they make us curious. And when humans get curious about something, we tend to take it apart to see how it works. The Admiral's confidence began developing what humans might call structural integrity issues. Impossible. No species has ever demonstrated immunity to Dominion psychological techniques. Well, there's a first time for everything, Elena replied cheerfully. Speaking of first, you might be interested to know that you're the first Vex-high Admiral to personally deliver a complete technical readout of your entire fleet's capabilities directly to our analysis teams. Those psychic broadcasts, they work both ways when you're dealing with a species that doesn't fold immediately. We've been reverse engineering your technology from the data streams in your failed mental attacks. The Admiral's four eyes widened in what was unmistakably panic. You cannot have penetrated your command networks, mapped your supply lines, identified the location of every Dominion facility within 50 light years? Elena's smile took on a distinctly predatory quality. Admiral, we've been preparing for this conversation since our deep space monitoring stations first detected Dominion expansion patterns 3 decades ago. Did you really think a species that survived 2 world wars and the invention of social media wouldn't be ready for a little psychological manipulation? She tapped her tablet, and suddenly the Admiral's tactical displays began showing detailed schematics of Dominion ships, complete with structural weaknesses and optimal targeting solutions. Here's Earth's counter-proposal. The Dominion immediately ceases all conquest activities and transitions to what we're calling a cooperative collective model. You help us establish new galactic laws regarding consent and mental autonomy, and in exchange, we don't demonstrate exactly how vulnerable psychic species are to targeted electromagnetic interference. 6 months later, the former Dominion of Eternal Order had been restructured into the Cooperative Collective, with Captain Elena Vasquez serving as the galaxy's first director of mental health and consent protocols. The Vex High, it turned out, were remarkably quick learners when properly motivated, and their former victims were slowly recovering their independence through carefully managed therapy programs. Admiral Zix Thara, now bearing the considerably less intimidating title of Rehabilitation Coordinator, spent his days attending human-led seminars on the ethical applications of psychic abilities. The irony wasn't lost on anyone. The galaxy's former masters of mind control were learning about free will from the one species that had never been in danger of losing it. Sometimes the best defense against having your mind controlled is simply having a mind too stubborn to be controlled in the first place. The Tribunal of Absolute Jurisdiction had been the galaxy's final word on legal matters for 15,000 years, which sounds impressive until you realize they'd maintained that record primarily by defining legal proceedings as do what we say or get vaporized. The Keth Mori, crystalline beings who communicated through harmonic frequencies that could shatter mountains, had perfected what they called expedited jurisprudence, a system where the verdict was decided before the trial, the sentence was non-negotiable, and appeals were handled by orbital bombardment platforms. Their edict of compliance had streamlined galactic governance beautifully. New species received a standardized legal framework, had 72 hours to accept it completely, and then enjoyed the benefits of tribunal protection in exchange for absolute obedience to tribunal law. It was efficient, predictable, and had never once failed to produce the desired outcome. The Kethmori took considerable pride in their perfect legal record, though they tended to gloss over the fact that most of their cases ended with the defendants being reduced to component atoms. Chief Arbiter Kethval materialized in Earth's orbital space aboard the tribunal flagship Inexorable Verdict, carrying what should have been humanity's final legal document. The Edict of Compliance for Sol System was already prepared, complete with predetermined sentencing guidelines and resource allocation schedules. Humans would be classified as a Class 7 primitive civilization, subject to immediate technological restrictions, mandatory cultural reformation, and permanent legal guardianship under tribunal oversight. The 72-hour compliance period was really more of a courtesy than a necessity. Most species spent those hours in various stages of panic, despair, and ultimately acceptance. The few that attempted resistance discovered that the tribunal's enforcement mechanisms were considerably more advanced than their own defensive capabilities. Dr. Rebecca Chen's response was therefore somewhat unexpected. Chief Arbiter Kethval, she said, appearing on the flagship's main communication screen with the calm demeanor of someone reviewing a restaurant menu. Thank you for delivering our legal documentation. I'm Dr. Chen, Earth's Chief Legal Analyst. Before we proceed, I'd like to request copies of the relevant statutes, precedent cases, and jurisdictional authority documentation supporting this proceeding. Kethaval's crystalline form pulsed with harmonic frequencies that translated roughly to confused irritation. There are no requests in tribunal proceedings. You will comply with the edict or face immediate enforcement action. I understand that's been your standard procedure, Rebecca replied, consulting what appeared to be an extensively annotated legal brief. However, according to Galactic Constitutional Framework Article 12, Section 4, which I believe predates the tribunal's establishment by about 3,000 years. All legal proceedings must provide defendants with access to applicable legal codes and precedent documentation. I'm simply exercising our rights under existing galactic law. The chief arbiter's harmonic output shifted into frequencies that had never before been recorded in Kethmori history. The tribunal is galactic law. We do not answer to primitive legal theories or ancient documents. About those ancient documents, Rebecca said, her expression taking on the dangerous pleasantness of a tax auditor who'd found something interesting. Our legal research teams have been studying galactic jurisprudence for the past 40 years. Fascinating reading, really. Did you know that the original Galactic Constitutional Convention actually established a rather comprehensive legal framework? Due process, appeals procedures, jurisdictional limitations, the works. She pulled up a holographic display showing what appeared to be several thousand pages of dense legal text. According to our analysis, the Tribunal of Absolute Jurisdiction has been operating without legitimate legal authority for approximately 14,732 years. Every ruling you've made since Galactic Year 847 has been constitutionally invalid. Kethval's crystalline structure began resonating at frequencies that suggested either rage or structural failure. Impossible. The tribunal's authority is absolute and unquestionable. Well, that's the thing about legal authority, Rebecca continued with the relentless cheerfulness of someone who'd found their calling. It has to actually derive from legitimate sources. You can't just declare yourself the supreme legal power and expect that to hold up under constitutional review. Though I have to admit, it's impressive that you maintained the illusion for so long. She tapped her tablet, and suddenly the tribunal's communication networks were flooded with legal documentation that shouldn't have existed. We've prepared a comprehensive class action lawsuit on behalf of 847 species who were subjected to legally invalid tribunal proceedings. We're seeking full restitution, restoration of sovereign rights, and immediate dissolution of all tribunal authority pending establishment of a legitimate galactic court system. The chief arbiter's attempts to contact tribunal headquarters were met with automated responses indicating that all tribunal legal databases were currently under constitutional review by systems that had somehow gained administrative access to their most secure networks. How could primitives possibly understand galactic legal principles? Kethval demanded, his harmonic frequencies cracking with desperation. Rebecca's smile took on the particularly savage quality that human lawyers reserve for opposing counsel who'd made critical errors. Chief Arbiter, we're the species that invented the concept of finding loopholes in our own laws for fun. Did you really think we wouldn't notice that your entire legal system was built on a foundation of intimidation rather than actual jurisprudence? 2 years later, the Galactic Court of Appeals operated out of a modest space station in neutral territory, staffed by judges from 17 different species and overseen by a human legal review board. The former Tribunal of Absolute Jurisdiction had been dissolved and its members enrolled in remedial law courses taught by Earth's finest legal scholars. Chief Arbiter Kethval, now working as a paralegal in the Appeals Court's Research Division, spent his days learning about actual legal procedures under the supervision of beings he'd once considered primitive. The irony was not lost on the galaxy's legal community. The species with no formal galactic legal training had become the teachers of cosmic jurisprudence. It turned out that 15,000 years of legal precedent meant nothing when none of it had been legally established in the first place. Sometimes the best way to win against an absolute authority is to simply read the fine print they forgot existed.